Please subscribe to our channel, Pacific Front Untold, and be sure to leave a comment after watching a video. The history of both world wars is often viewed through a Western perspective. Most Western military history often glosses over the involvement of colonial armies and other foreign and transnational forces, who played a significant and often influential role in turning the tide of battle, despite facing significant logistical challenges and racist attitudes. For example, Indian colonial armies during World War I were often marked by acute ethnic division, food shortages, significant taxation, and intensive recruitment efforts that often involved the use of force. After World War I, India was a separate signatory to the Treaty of Versailles, as well as a founding member of the League of Nations, the only non-independent territory to be so. The Indian Army of World War II was significantly different from the force that fought in the First World War in several ways, as the British had included more Indians in the officer corps as a response to nationalist demands. This process was bitterly opposed by many British Indian Army officers and led to racial tensions among them. Most Indian officers faced discrimination at the hands of their fellow British officers and were often viewed as outcasts among the larger officer class. They were often also paid less and had to endure harsher conditions than their British counterparts. Although the Government of India Act of 1935 led to some power being held by the Indian Congress by placing the provinces under elected departments, the British continued to retain control of all core bases of power. Lord Linlithgow, the Viceroy of India at the time, stated that this was a move best calculated to hold India to the empire. This was then followed by Linlithgow's declaration of India's entry into the war without consulting any of its elected leaders. When the Second World War began, the Indian Congress was much more reluctant to support the war effort on vague promises, but despite this, the Indian Army expanded to a strength of nearly 2 million men by 1943. The Indian nationalists at the time, including Gandhi, nurtured the hope that these sacrifices by Indians would be compensated through an increased political status for India, a step that would lead eventually to self-governing dominion. The undemocratic entry into World War II helped launch the Quit India movement in 1942, which was characterized by mass protests against 200 years of British rule. The Indian National Congress, which had denounced Nazi ideology, demanded independence before extending support for the fight against Germany. The British authorities responded to this uprising by imprisoning national and local leaders and by imposing sanctions to suppress their supporters. This sentiment was not shared by everyone in India, and several leaders, including Subhas Chandra Bose and Mohan Singh Deb, advocated a military alliance with Germany or Japan to secure independence from Britain. They believed that Britain's stand against Nazism and fascism amounted to hypocrisy, since they themselves were responsible for blatant human rights violations in their own colonies. The Indian Legion and the Indian National Army, formed from prisoners of war belonging to the Imperial Indian Army and expatriate Indian communities, were persuaded to fight against the British to secure independence. Despite all this, Indian participation in the Allied campaign, particularly in the China-Burma-India theater, was crucial to achieving victory, since India's strategic location prevented the expansion of the Imperial Japanese Army into South Asia. The involvement of Indian soldiers in both world wars has largely been forgotten by Western populations. Several instances of this can be inferred through the largely isolated monuments commemorating Indian victories, such as the memorials at Imphal and Kohima, which are seen as victories by the colonial masters, and glosses over the contribution made by infantry divisions comprised entirely of Indians. Many books that deal with the Second World War, and even those focusing on the war in Asia, often neglect the vital role played by the Indian Army. This is highlighted through dispatches and records from that era, such as the work of H.P. Wilmot, who outlined the conquest of Burma during 1994 by the British 14th Army, forgetting to mention that this army was composed of Indians. Indians fought throughout the world, including in the European theater against Germany and the South Asian regions against the onslaught of the Japanese in Burma. Furthermore, in the Middle East and African theaters, pre-independence India provided the largest volunteer force of any nation during World War II. Indian forces also played a role in liberating Italy from Nazi control, and Indian divisions led the advance in the decisive Battle of Monte Cassino. Indian participation in World War II was crucial to the victory of the Allied forces. However, this era of Indian history has, for the most part, been remembered more for its drive towards independence than its contribution to the Allied military victory. While some of this can be attributed to the wider neglect by historians to fail to analyze India in the context of World War II, it also stems from the fact that the newly independent states of Pakistan and India were preoccupied with creating distinct national narratives at the expense of the former. The war provided an opportunity for groups at the margins of Indian society to find new avenues of social and economic mobility, and also led to the emergence of India as a major Asian power. Contributing to the Allied victory did not result in an official World War II Remembrance Day for India, which to this day is considered by Indians as a reminder of its colonial period. However, understanding India's involvement in both world wars provides an opportunity to ask critical questions about its past and generate awareness of India's participation in world events that have been intrinsic to its growth and development as an independent nation.